please. Those of you that are standing in the back still waiting to find a seat, we do have some seats here in the front tables. I know that puts you front and center, and some people are against that, but we also have some room and some seats over here. The tables to my right, your left. We want to make sure that we get started and stay on schedule. So please make your way into the room. Dwayne Casey, making a way. Look at you, right in the front row. Good for you. Look at that. He's a trendsetter. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to get your attention. I hate to curtail good fellowship and conversation, but I have to. I promise when we conclude for this afternoon, there'll be more opportunities for you to talk and to mingle and to share best practices. Whoa, that happened quickly. Did y'all hear that? The hush fell over the crowd. Wonderful. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Ryan Miller. I'm the Executive Director for Accelerate Mississippi, and I cannot be more excited and grateful for your presence here today. I am very excited, in fact, that we have so many of our career coaches. If you're a career coach, raise your hand in the room. That's what I'm talking about. That's exciting. We are so delighted that you are here, and I'm going to have some expectations, some homework assignments for you later. Just FYI, you're going to want to write that down. There'll be a quiz at the end of the symposium. You'll have to turn it in to me before you can leave. I'm just kidding. Look, we are delighted that you are here with us for our second annual Mississippi Horizons Workforce Symposium. This is what we envision this event to be, an opportunity for us as a community of Mississippians to come together to find ways in which we can engage the people of this state in more productive, effective, and efficient ways, getting them onto pathways that lead to unbelievable career opportunities, helping Mississippians change their trajectory. And so part of the reason I'm excited that the coaches are here is because in a very real sense, you all are boots on the ground. You are shepherds, helping Mississippi students find access to paths that they wouldn't have otherwise known about. We have coaches in our midst. We have community college partners in our midst. We have community colleges in the state that work tirelessly every day in their community to help people find access to opportunity, access to hope, access to changes in their familial trajectory, oftentimes resulting in the building of familial wealth in households that may never have experienced that before. We have in the room with us IHL representatives from our four-year colleges who understand that they too are a part of the workforce conversation. We have in the room industry, partners that recognize that gone are the days where they can simply put a sign up and expect people to come to them. These are industry partners who recognize we've got to roll up our sleeves and work with our brothers and sisters in education and in policy development to ensure that we find the people that we need with the skills that they need to have when we need to have them. We have in the room other sister organizations and state agencies, state offices who also are positioned and resourced to try to help in this space. This is an opportunity for us as a state on a yearly basis to ask ourselves hard questions. Are we as a state, are we as a community, are we as partners doing what we need to do to put our neighbors and our family members and our friends, community members on the right path to success? This is arguably what the symposium is designed to be, an opportunity for us to collaborate. It's an opportunity for us to learn and to absorb, but it's also an opportunity to engage in discussion and even sometimes debate. I was just in two meetings earlier this afternoon where there was robust conversation, discussion, and even some constructive pushback on positions that some folks had in the room. That is a wonderful thing, and it is a testament to what this event was designed to be, an opportunity to check ourselves, an opportunity to ask ourselves, are we doing the right things, or do we need to redevise our strategy? Each year, it's my hope that we can, as an organization, as an office, lead the conversation to ask ourselves, is what we've done in this previous year working? And if it isn't, how do we change gears? Is what we've done in the state of Mississippi beneficial? And if it isn't, where do we find that benefit? Where do we find good return on investment in the resources with which we have been blessed to ensure our people have the opportunities we want them to have? Now, I'm going to share with you just briefly. I'm going to go into more detail in the morning on this. Who was here last year? Show of hands. Man, all right, look at that. Repeat offenders. Here we go. Last year, I had a theme. I asked you all to join us in a battle. In fact, if you can recall, I used a description of one of William Shakespeare's plays, Henry V, where the king is imploring his men to go once more unto the breach. Once more, we have to throw ourselves into the battle every single day to try to make a positive change. I asked you last year to be a partner with us as we went one more time into battle, once more into the breach. That was the theme last year, and everything that we tried to discuss in the breakout sessions and in some of the keynote addresses was designed to try to explain we are a team together, we are in the battle together, and we are going shoulder to shoulder into battle together. This year, it is time for us to hold fast. Now, I won't get into the biblical theology of what I think it means to hold fast, but I have seen that term and that phrase used in any number of contexts, including some of my favorite movies. So in the morning, I'm going to go into more detail about some of those movies and what hold fast means. Holding fast, as I'll share just briefly, in my mind, is once we're in the battle, sticking together, making sure that we stay shoulder to shoulder, making sure that we are watching each other and making sure that we've got each other's back. That is my desire in this symposium this year, is that every session, every conversation, every meeting, every collaboration is done with the sense that we are in it together, we are in the thick of things, and we have to hold fast together. So, challenge me on that. Push back to me on that as you see fit, or encourage me in that we can do that together. For the state of Mississippi to be successful and for us to find great return on investment that we are making collaboratively, help me better understand how I, as a state entity, can be your partner in holding fast amidst the battle. So we'll talk more about that in the morning, but in the meantime, I did want to just welcome you, thank you. I know that this is time away from your jobs. I know that this is time away from family, and I know that this is a valuable resource that you are focusing on this event, and I cannot thank you enough for that. We have some wonderful thought leaders here this week that are going to share their perspective of what it means to go into the fray together, be shoulder to shoulder, and fight the good fight for the long haul. We have some wonderful thought leaders who have been successful around the country doing exactly what we are attempting to do here, which is to provide better coordination of workforce strategy and resources. And I am excited to be able to have them a part of this conversation this year. I do want to remind you that it is important that you refer to your agenda as much as possible. I don't want you to miss any meeting or any opportunity to engage in a session that might be of interest to you. If there is a change, or if we're having to pivot or have some sort of audible call at the line of scrimmage, I will make sure that I announce that in the mornings, at lunch, and at the culmination of a day's events preceding the following day. But make sure you keep that at your ready. So that you are making your way to any location that you would find interest in. And if you see an Accelerate Mississippi team member and you have questions about where to go or what session you might be better suited for, please ask us. We'll be happy to direct you along your way. But again, we're delighted to have you here and grateful for the week that you're going to spend with us. At this time, I'm going to ask my colleague, Dr. Courtney Taylor, to come to the podium and introduce our first keynote speaker. Dr. Taylor.
Good afternoon. So I have the honor today of introducing you all to Mr. Stephen Moret. Stephen currently serves as the president and CEO of the Strata Education Foundation. Stephen is formerly from Mississippi, and since he spent 16 years here as a child and young adult, we 100% claim him as ours. So it doesn't matter where you live, Stephen, you're Mississippian. But we are excited to have Stephen here. Prior to being at the Strata Education Foundation, Stephen was served as the CEO of the Virginia Economic Development Partnership, where he led many initiatives, one of them being implementing Virginia's $1.1 billion tech talent investment program. Stephen served previously before that for the Louisiana Economic Development Secretary, Stephen is a friend of Mississippi. He has been working with us along our journey as we move forward, and we are really excited to have him here today to talk to everyone. Stephen?
Wonderful. Well, thank you, Courtney, and what an incredible privilege it is for me to be here today and to be here with all of you in my great home state of Mississippi. I'm looking forward to chatting with you a bit today about the future that I see for our country and a future that I can imagine coming to life in the great state of Mississippi as well. Before I jump in, I just kind of want to establish my credibility a little bit for the audience. I was born in St. Louis, but I only lived there for 2 years. I grew up in Mississippi. My parents moved to Purvis, but my parents divorced shortly after that. I spent most of my childhood, really, the rest of my childhood, as the son of a single mother growing up in Mississippi in Purvis, Poplarville, Laurel, Pearl, and Brandon. Ultimately went to Northwest Rankin for high school. When I graduated high school, I did, you might imagine, well, what happened after I was 18? Well, I applied to both Mississippi State University and LSU. In Baton Rouge. Mississippi State did not see me as scholarship material. I got a full ride to LSU. You can read into that what you will. But I did end up going to LSU as a result. One of the things I wanted to share with you as I was getting ready for today, and really over the last year, I have been quite impressed and inspired with so many good things that are happening in this state, in my home state of Mississippi. I know there are a lot of big challenges. I know there are a lot of aspirations that are perhaps not yet fulfilled, but there are some very important and exciting things that are happening here. I read many publications, but certainly one of them is the New York Times, and I just can't tell you how delighted I was to recently, just in the last few months, read a headline that says Mississippi is offering lessons for America on education, about the remarkable progress in elementary school reading education in Mississippi. I also was very excited as I looked across the room, not just today, but sort of culminating in today, that Mississippi is doing this wonderfully innovative and I think extremely impactful thing of bringing a career coach to every high school in the state of Mississippi. I want you to know that when I grew up, growing up as the son of a single mother, there's some things maybe you miss out on sometimes. And the job that I have now, which is a job that is almost completely focused on how do we help more people to secure good jobs and economic mobility through some form of post-secondary education or training. When I interviewed for this job, it was the only job I've ever interviewed for that I choked up in the interview. And I was just thinking about all those kids across the country and in Mississippi, the challenges they face, and how we can help create pathways to opportunity for people. And one of the most important ones is giving people quality coaching that they may not be able to get at home. And I just want to applaud all of you for what you're doing in Mississippi in that regard. Also just wanted to briefly mention I'm excited about the creation of Accelerate Mississippi and the vision for this initiative, everything that's gone into it with the great leadership of the Mississippi Economic Council, this team, the legislature, and others. So kudos to that. So let me share with you a little bit of what I'm going to talk to you about today. See if I can make this go forward here. There we go. So I'm going to start with the national challenge, which I think you'll find familiar in Mississippi. I'll tell you a little bit about who Strata is, which will help explain, why I'm here today. I'll share a vision for the future, talk about some of the things that are coming up, and then kind of end on what I hope will be a little bit of a high note about some of the opportunities that I see in Mississippi. Courtney's assured me we have plenty of time, so we're going to have time for questions and comments at the end. I would definitely value that at the end, so really want to encourage you to share any thoughts that you may have with me. Let me first talk about the national challenge. And this challenge is a challenge that is really quite similar in all 50 states in the country. And it's a challenge that not only are employers so often not getting what they need, but there's actually a reality that many individuals are not getting the good job opportunities that they need either. This is not an issue that is unique to Mississippi. In fact, one of the things that I learned in leading economic development in Louisiana and Virginia is that when you look at the competitive landscape across the country, the vast majority of America looks a lot like Mississippi. Largely rural, largely smaller metro areas, and with all the challenges that go along with that. There's not a single state in the country that's yet fully addressed the challenges that you all are working to address here, but we want to help Mississippi be one of the first. Well, let me talk about some of the challenges. Obviously, tech innovation is really accelerating. That's creating a lot of change, most recently with generative AI. Meeting talent needs has become the top concern of business executives. Many of you here today are in the economic development community. I've been involved in economic development for 20 years of my career. A magazine called Area Development surveys corporate executives and site selection consultants every year. 10 years ago, workforce issues were usually in the top 5 or 6, but the last few years they've been number 1 every single year, and that was true even before the pandemic. Workforce has gone from something that's pretty important 15 years ago to the dominant driver of economic development success today. And that means that the work you're doing could not be more important. We have one of the largest shortages of workers that we've had in our history. We've been running about 10 million job openings against about 6 million unemployed individuals. But we also have a good job shortage in this country. I ran these numbers a few months ago. We have roughly 30 million full-time employed adults in America, 30 million full-time employed adults not in school making less than $35,000 a year. That's a real problem. And by the way, that's a problem in every state in America, not just the largely rural states. Another issue we don't talk about enough is misalignment in the labor market. Roughly 40% of the new college grads in Mississippi, and in fact in every state in America, start off not in a college-level job. And those folks that get a bachelor's degree or higher and don't get a college-level job almost never have a significant earnings premium associated with their employment and the occupation that they're in. It's one of the things that's really fueled this student loan disaster. And then even as we have all these folks seeking better jobs, we have a chronic undersupply of workers with key types of talent in technology and healthcare and nursing, skilled trades, manufacturing technicians, and so forth. So there's plenty of issues to work on. And that's what you all are talking about here today, and that's everything that Strata is focused on. So let me just tell you a little bit about us. Strata Education Foundation is a national foundation whose entire focus is on strengthening the link between education and opportunity in America. We've talked a lot about educational attainment in Mississippi and across the country. Many years ago, a few decades ago, the big focus was how do we help more people go to college? Then a couple decades later, and really for the last 2 decades, the big focus has been on how do we get more people to complete college? But one of the things that has become more and more obvious to folks is that even the people that go to college and complete college, while most of them do well, there's a sizable minority that don't. And so our focus at Strata is how do we make sure that more people can not only pursue some kind of post-secondary credential, and by the way, that means not just college, it could mean certificates, non-degree credentials, apprenticeships, and so forth, but how do we make sure that everyone that pursues opportunity can find it? And we do this in a lot of different ways, which I'll touch on just a little bit, but a few examples. We have a very robust, actionable research program. Would certainly encourage you to check out our website for some of the work that we're doing there. We do grant making across the country to support innovative initiatives that strengthen the connections between education and employment. We make investments in this space in companies and nonprofits that are doing work in the space. We provide technical assistance. We're increasingly providing public policy solutions, both state and federal. And we also own a variety of nonprofits. You may have heard of a few of these, Road Trip Nation or Council for Adult Education and Learning. These are actually subsidiaries of Strata. We are involved in one way or another in every state in the country. And certainly for me, as a native of Mississippi, I want to be more involved in Mississippi, and I appreciate Ryan and Courtney and others that are helping make that possible. Just some examples of some of our past work related to employers, because many of you may not have heard of Strata, but you've probably heard of the work that we do. Some of you may be familiar with the U.S. Chamber Foundation's Talent Pipeline Management Initiative. Strata's been the second biggest funder of that in its history. We've helped create workforce centers across the country, like the Kentucky Chamber Workforce Center, one of the largest in the country. We've helped to fund and help create Apprenticeships for America, which is really looking to help the country to catch up with so many others that are way, way ahead of us in this space. And we've issued a variety of very important research projects historically. So let me talk about where Strata is going for the future. I've been CEO for about 18 months. We've recently finished our latest strategic plan for the future, and the entire focus of that strategic plan is collaborating with others, collaborating with policymakers, with learners, with educators, with employers to help bring to life a post-secondary education and training ecosystem that provides equitable pathways to opportunity. That's our entire focus. And as I'll talk about here in just a moment, this is a system issue. This is not an issue that a single part of education can solve. It requires multi-sector efforts to make this work. Now, as we've done our research, we've really found 5 big areas of opportunity that would help to strengthen workforce competitiveness as well as expand equitable pathways to opportunity. I'm just going to touch on each of those briefly. The first one we call clear outcomes. Anyone who considers some kind of post-secondary education or training program should have a good idea of what kind of employment, salary, and occupational outcomes they can expect when they go. But there's some huge gaps in the system today, in Mississippi, and in fact in every other state in the country. We really aim to close those gaps so that people can make more informed choices about post-secondary education and training opportunities. The second big focus, and it's one that Mississippi's making rapid progress in, is quality coaching. There's been a lot of research done on this. The kids that grow up in high-income, well-educated families, they say that they get most of what information they need about career and about higher education right at home around the dinner table, right? But there's a lot of folks growing up as first-gen students, as lower-income students, that really need more assistance. And that's why the work you all are doing on quality coaching in high schools in particular is so important. But it's also a gap at the college level as well, and also for adult learners, folks that are later on working in their career. Affordability is a big challenge, not so much perhaps in Mississippi, but certainly in other states across the country. Work-based learning, another huge opportunity. People have better outcomes. They make more money. They're less likely to be unemployed or underemployed if they have a meaningful paid work-based learning experience. We want everyone to have that kind of opportunity in the country. And finally, employer alignment. One of the most interesting things that most states don't realize, and certainly Mississippi would be included in this list, is that the way that we fund higher education actively discourages higher education institutions from being responsive to the labor market. Why is that? They literally are penalized if they produce more of what the labor market needs. That is because the vast majority, in fact, nearly all the high-wage, high-demand programs cost significantly more to deliver than the more general, say, liberal arts type programs. But typically, states don't really fully account for that. So if you want more nurses, if you want more engineers, you want more data scientists, computer science graduates, manufacturing technicians, and others, we have to fund higher education in a way that ensures that they're encouraged to do that. And we've got some ideas for how to make that happen. So I just want to talk briefly about each of these 5 areas, where we're at today, and the future that we envision both nationally and I think potentially in Mississippi as well, and then I'll talk about sort of where we go from here. So when we look at clear outcomes, when we think about the data infrastructure, I just want to give you a couple examples of shortcomings today. One is there's a lack of transparency on employment outcomes and pathways, especially non-degree credentials, right? If you go nationally, you could go to the college scorecard, for example, and for just about any college in the country, for most of their degrees, you could find out what somebody makes on average, let's say, or for median. But for certificates, for apprenticeships, for non-degree credentials, it's a black hole. There's really no good quality information for that. In Mississippi, you've connected your education and wage records. You can see kind of the earnings that people get when they finish different educational or training programs, and you know what industry they work in, but you actually don't know what job they have, what occupation that they have. This is really critical. It's a big gap that almost every state in the country has. It needs to be closed. The other thing that people don't quite understand is there's more to employment outcomes than just what you study and say what your grades are. There's a bunch of other factors like internships, leadership experiences, and other things that really go into how successful one is after they finish some kind of post-secondary educational training program. So there's some big gaps there. There's several opportunities that we see for the future. One is modernize education employment. That's what I mean by ET, education employment data systems that help to close those gaps across the country. One of those is enhanced wage records. I know Mississippi, I think, is working on this now under the leadership of Patrick Sullivan and Accelerate Mississippi and others. I just want to encourage you to finish that work because it's a big opportunity. One of the other big opportunities is providing quality employment outcomes for non-degree credentials, for certificates, for certifications, for apprenticeships and other programs. This is a problem that Strata itself is looking to solve. And finally, helping not only learners but coaches to really understand the predictors of employment outcomes. When we look at graduates of various post-secondary education programs, we often talk about the averages, right? But there's a massive range of outcomes. And there are predictors that kind of help people understand or could help people understand how to have better outcomes more consistently. So those are a few examples in the clear outcomes area. In quality coaching, you're already way down the track, but this is an issue nationwide in most states, not Mississippi for high school, but in most states in high school, college, and in workforce development for adults, there simply is very little access to quality coaching. And this hurts the students and the learners that are coming from low-income backgrounds the worst. There's also a lack of standards for what quality really means. We envision a future when everyone can access quality coaching in high school, in college, and also for adult learners as well. Let me talk about affordability a little bit. There's a number of gaps there. Again, Mississippi's doing fairly well, I think, in this space. But many times people are either not able to go because they can't find the financing to go, or they go and then they can't afford to pay back the cost of the program because of the loans that they took out. We think that's a critical gap. Right now, you can get federal financial aid. You can get Pell Grants if you're a low-income student for a degree, but you can't get it for a non-degree credential, even if it provides a high return on investment. That's a big gap that needs to be solved. And one of the biggest challenges for parents who send their kids off to college is colleges and universities use very different ways of describing what their financial aid packages are. And often people will decide they're going to go somewhere and then not realize what the true bottom line cost is to them. These are big problems for families across the country. We imagine a future where states and the federal government put a greater focus on financial need, a greater focus on supporting the whole range of programs that are out there. Anything that consistently provides good outcomes, we think should be eligible for financial aid. And also that we would see a nationwide adoption of transparency standards for financial aid offers. Strata is actually funding an effort right now that's going to go nationwide in the next year, that if you have kids going to school, not this coming fall, but the next one, almost every offer that you get from colleges across the country will have basically the same format. Kind of like if you imagine sort of a truth in lending standard when you go for a mortgage, same thing for a college degree. This will be a big step forward in the country. Let me talk about work-based learning just a little bit. This may surprise you, but in America today, and I suspect this is true in Mississippi as well, most students who finish college with a bachelor's degree do not have a single paid internship before they finish. Not a single paid internship. That's the majority. Now, it's a higher percentage if you count unpaid internships, but the problem with unpaid internships is you're kind of sort of privileging the affluent kids that can afford to do that. We envision a future when anyone who is a career-seeking college student can have access to at least one paid internship before they finish. This is going to be a big lift, but I will tell you, Virginia, for example, is setting out right now to be the first state in the country to achieve this at every single college and university in the state. Their goal that's been adopted by every single university president is for every single college student to be able to complete a paid internship before they finish. You all know the story on apprenticeships. We're massively behind the leading countries in the world. But for each of these problems, there are solutions. When you think about paid internships, we need to think about beefing up that sort of career services support and providing incentives, particularly for small and medium-sized businesses to have paid interns. We also need to provide incentives for intermediaries to expand access to apprenticeships. There's a great book coming out on this topic in the fall in November called Apprentice Nation that's going to lay out a vision for the country on that topic. And also looking at other innovative things we can do, like making work study more available for off-campus jobs. Those are a few examples in work-based learning. And then finally, I want to touch on employer alignment. Again, the problems you've got often limited access to those high-demand, high-wage programs because of how states are funded. The other thing we see, though, on the company side is this sort of rampant credential inflation, where a company is saying, hey, I want a bachelor's degree or maybe even a master's degree for a job that doesn't really require college-level skills. This is really creating not only a huge increase in the debt that people are taking on to try to get good jobs, but it also means that the talent pool is less diverse that those companies are looking at. The other thing that we see is that policymakers around the country, and I certainly think while Mississippi's making great progress, I think there's opportunity for improvement here, don't have a robust understanding of what those supply-demand gaps really are. So these are some big issues that are kind of holding back employer alignment. We see kind of three big solutions to this. One is shifting the funding model to really account for the cost, so the institutions are really not penalized for being responsive to labor market demand. Second, encouraging companies and public sector employers to adopt skills-based hiring practices. If you can do the job, you should be able to get the job. It shouldn't just be about an expensive credential on your resume. And finally, we think there's a case for every state to create some kind of state office of education economics that can provide trusted, credible analysis of education to labor market mismatches in every region, in every occupation, in every industry in the state. These are big, big opportunities for the future that we see as we see the future of this country and sort of imagine what's possible nationwide and in Mississippi. We care so much about these ideas that Strata is investing millions of dollars this year, and we have dozens of both internal and external experts working on creating something that we're probably going to call the State Opportunity Index. This will be a 50-state assessment of how well each state in the country is positioning individuals with equitable pathways to opportunity and is positioning their employers to be able to meet their talent needs. For each of these 5 areas that I talked about, clear outcomes, quality coaching, affordability, work-based learning, and employer alignment, we're assessing on a sort of an even keel all 50 states. We expect to publish this in March for the first time, and then we're going to publish it annually after that to sort of track progress across the country. One of the things that Strata is going to be doing is for those states, and I suspect Mississippi will be included in this list, for those states that want to get better, that want to improve, that want to be leaders in this space, we're going to provide technical assistance. We're going to provide grants. We're going to provide model public policy solutions to help those states advance. And we are seeing enormous interest in this across the country, from Ohio, from Florida, certainly from Mississippi, where Scott Waller, the chair of the Mississippi Economic Council, is actually leading the National Workforce Transformation Task Force of the National Association of State Chambers, which is bringing together the strong majority of all the state chamber CEOs in the country. But we have states as diverse as New York, California, Florida, and others that are coming together to look at ways to improve, right? And we're going to be there to help them advance. I want to share with you just a couple coming attractions at Strata. I'll end talking about some opportunities specifically that I see for Mississippi, and then I'd love to take any questions that you may have. One report that we have coming out, this is a follow-up, a second edition of what I think is the single most important research report that Strata has ever published. It was first published in 2018. It was called The Permanent Detour. The Permanent Detour is a study of underemployment of college graduates. This was the first national study that looked at how common underemployment is and how it changes over time. Everybody in this room knows a story of someone that got a bachelor's degree and started off, working as a Starbucks barista or something like that, right? And we all have the image that, well, eventually they get into a good college-level job. It turns out that's usually not true. What happens most of the time, if a person gets a bachelor's degree and does not initially get some kind of college-level job, 10 years later, they will still be underemployed. This is a huge issue. We're going to do a second edition of this coming out probably in November. We'll be looking at for the first time how underemployment varies by institution, institutional selectivity, by state, by geography, metro versus rural areas, and so forth. It's really going to be a very important and interesting piece of work. Another piece of work we're starting now, this will come out probably in mid-2024, is an analysis of interstate migration. You know all about the brain drain. The brain drain in Mississippi is just like it is in other largely rural states. It's a common challenge. There's no rural state in America that's solved this yet, but Mississippi might be the first one. The work that we're going to be doing here is not just to sort of account for the size of these interstate migration flows of talent, but to really understand what are the factors that are driving those flows. And part of this will be a quantitative analysis. Part of this will be a survey, a large-scale survey of folks that have moved across state lines to understand, what was driving those moves. I want to share one last idea for Mississippi. There was actually a whole session on this earlier today about creating a customized workforce program for the state. There are many things that you're going to do that are going to be super hard and are going to take many years to achieve. This one is hard, but not as hard as a lot of those other things. I'm still amazed that only a handful of states in the country have done this. I want to just start by telling you a story. In 2007, I was running a regional economic development organization in Louisiana, and one of my economic development folks from Georgia was always complaining about we didn't know what we were doing in workforce development. And I called her into my office expecting an apology, and she just amped it up to the DEFCON 5 and was just saying, you guys have no idea what you're doing. And I said, well, who do you think is doing this well? And she said, Georgia has the Quick Start program, which is a custom workforce training program, and it's amazing, and you guys look like you're Little League compared to what they're doing. She said, if you ever want to visit, I'm happy to set up a tour. And she set up a tour. I spent about a day and a half in Georgia touring their program, learning more of about the program, excuse me. By the way, I'm certain the people in Georgia regret they ever invited me for this visit. But what I saw was the most impressive thing that I've ever seen in workforce development. A company would come to Georgia. This is, again, 2007. What Georgia would say is, look, if you locate in Georgia, and by the way, no matter where you go in Georgia, we will provide a fully trained workforce, recruitment, screening, development of customized training, and delivery of that training to make sure that you get your facility fully up and running on schedule or ahead of schedule. I walked around this office. They had curriculum designers. They had a film studio. They had just these incredible, they had literally 100 people working on this thing. It was incredible. And I came back to Louisiana a few months later. I was appointed Secretary of Economic Development, and I told the governor, if we only do one thing, we need to create a custom workforce program. That program is called LED Fast Start. About 4 years later, it became ranked the #1 program in the country, stayed #1 until it got edged out by the Virginia Talent Accelerator program, which I created in Virginia. But I want you to look at the rankings here. This is the most recent ones available. There's two magazines that put out rankings of custom workforce programs. One is Business Facilities there on the left, Area Development on the right. I've spent a lot of time talking with top site selection consultants around the country. Grace Swoop, who many of you know, probably knows all of them, and I think would agree with this statement that if you ask those folks, who is best at this, they almost invariably name 5 states, maybe 6 states: Georgia, Louisiana, Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Alabama, 6 states. Outside of those 6, there's really nobody that's regularly considered one of the top states in the country. This is something that Mississippi could do and could achieve in, let's say, 3 years from full stop. I know it because I've done it twice in 2 other states, and I'm still stunned that not more states have done this. The folks that actually decide where these big projects go, they like these programs better than anything else that's available. So what would it take to do this in Mississippi? You need startup funds, $2 or $3 million a year, probably about $7 to $10 million a full run rate. Single most important thing other than money is getting the right person to lead the program. When I created the programs in Louisiana and Virginia, we recruited, actually in both cases, we recruited someone from Quick Start, from the leadership team out of Georgia, but now you've got a couple other states you could certainly choose from. It's important that this program, if you create it, have a commitment to provide world-class solutions every single time. If you're not willing to do that, you really shouldn't do it because it wouldn't be a good return on investment for the state. So having that budget is key. Having it based at a place like Accelerate Mississippi would make a lot of sense, I think, because of the value of that agency. And then having an experience center, and I've built a couple of those as well. It's not super complicated, but it does take a few $1 million. It does take the right leadership, and it would make a lot of impact quickly. I'm going to end on one last slide, just talk briefly about what I see as this evolution of progress in workforce development in Mississippi. Accelerate Mississippi was established, I think, with a really good mission, obviously a very energetic, passionate leadership team that's working very hard. I've enjoyed getting to know them. I mentioned to you earlier how impressed I am with the career coaching initiative that you're doing in Mississippi. I would love to see every state in America do that, and I hope and maybe even expect that they will. As you look to the future, I want to mention just a handful of things that I think would be kind of no-brainer, high-impact things for Mississippi to do. One is building that modernized education employment data infrastructure. You're already well down the track, but there's a couple big opportunities to improve. And again, Mississippi is not behind in this at all. In fact, Mississippi's got a chance to really be a leader in this. Second, incentives to expand paid internships and apprenticeships. Huge opportunity to not only improve outcomes for individuals, but to improve the talent pipeline for companies as well. Third, adjustments to the higher ed funding model to expand high-demand, high-wage programs. When we created the $1.1 billion Techtown Investment Program in Virginia, we really had all of higher ed on board. Nobody was pushing back. And the reason was we accounted for the higher cost of computer science, higher cost faculty, higher cost startup packages, higher cost labs, right? Somehow you've got to incorporate that. We can certainly help. Building a world-class workforce program. And I think finally taking this sort of emerging partnership between the economic development community and the workforce development community and Accelerate Mississippi, and really just working to continue to strengthen that. I think all these things would really help Accelerate Mississippi and really the state as a whole to be positioned not only for workforce development success, but for economic growth and vitality as well. And I just want to pledge to you again my personal commitment as a native of Mississippi to be a partner in this and to bring resources from Strata along the way. If you'd like to learn more about us, we have a lot of great stuff on our website at strataeducation.org. And with that, I'm going to pause. I'd be happy to take any comments or questions that you might have for me. Okay. I mean, I would say, well, I've mentioned two things. I think the custom workforce opportunity it's fast, it's visible, it's big, and it can be catalytic to help other things happen. You know, we originally created the program we created in Louisiana because just like Mississippi, we'd have prospects say, well, gosh, where am I going to get my workforce? I'm looking at bigger metros. You have a high poverty rate. You don't have enough of these particular skills. We wanted to take workforce and turn it from a question mark into a strength, and we did that. But what we didn't anticipate was by having a team that was working on 50 to 100 custom projects every single year, working with leading companies around the world, we actually got smarter about workforce development in general. If many of you may know the head of the Community and Technical College system in Louisiana named Monty Sullivan. One of the things he's been there many years. He said one of the best things that ever happened to us was Fast Start. He said because all this work they were doing with all these companies, they would give it to us right after they would do these startups. And it helped us to get better at the community colleges, and it also helped them to get more students over time. So I think that one's like the ultimate kind of low-hanging fruit, high-impact opportunity. The other thing I would just say more broadly, and this is something we never quite did in Louisiana, but we were very much getting to in Virginia, and that is truly the future and really the present of economic development is talent development. Talent development wins. And you got to have sites, you got to have incentives, you got to have competitive, prepared locations and tax structure and all that, all very important. But talent is the ultimate differentiator. I think if you sort of step back and say, how could we make talent development a central focus of our economic development strategy, partnering with the, let's say MDA and Accelerate Mississippi working together hand in hand, I think that's a huge opportunity to position Mississippi for a very bright future. Sorry, that was a long answer to an easy question.
Yes, it was a great presentation. So I've been involved in work-based learning for the previous couple of years and plugged into a lot of the national landscape around that discussion. But from your vantage point and from your experience around the country over the years, how robust do you see that work-based learning could be?
How robust do I...
How robust you see work-based learning could be, say, from a middle school, high school level, even into postgraduate?
I think it would be difficult to overstate the potential impact of work-based learning, truly. So many kids, they have an idea of what they think they might want to do, right? Maybe they had a parent or a relative. Mostly they've maybe seen things on TikTok or YouTube or something like that. But there's nothing like, as everyone in this room knows, you really don't know how much you're going to like something until you actually do it, right? Until you actually get in that context. So one, I think it's critical to help particularly younger learners, but even older folks, to be able to sort of have a taste of something to kind of validate, is this what I want to do, or do I want to do something different? The earlier you can learn that and kind of, hone in what your goals are, I think that's extremely powerful. It's also really big for employers. I forget the exact percentages, but a very large percentage of paid interns ultimately join those companies as full-time employees later on. So huge impact for individuals, huge impact for companies. I think also huge impact for equity, right? If we care about giving everyone a chance to succeed, let's face it, we've had, in the world that I live in, people will often say, hey, my son's looking for, a summer internship or something like that, and these things almost get handed around sort of nonchalantly, right? But if we really want to have a wide aperture that everyone can go through, I think making sure that we make those paid internships widely available, I think is huge. So I think the opportunity is enormous. The other big benefit that we don't think about enough is if you imagine expanding the number of companies, expanding the number of folks that are participating in paid internships, the other thing that's going to happen is it's going to bring the employer community and the education community closer together. That's what we saw in Virginia and Louisiana with the Custom Workforce Program, but that's only 50 to 100 projects a year, right? With internships, you're talking about thousands and thousands of people, thousands of relationships. I actually think that the indirect impact of expanding work-based learning could be even bigger than the obvious direct impact. Thank you. Great question. Okay, well, wonderful to be here. Thanks for all you're doing.